Okay, and now about how you feel about the prospects of AGI and its influence on humanity. We'll start with Ben, and then Yosha will hear your response. And I also want to read out a tweet
I'm
or an
okay.
X.
I'm okay to start with Yosha on this one.
Sure, sure. Let me read this tweet, whatever they're called now, from Sam Altman at SAMA, and I'll leave the link in the description. He wrote, in quotes, "Short timelines and slow takeoff will be a pretty good call, I think. But the way people define the start of the takeoff may make it seem otherwise." Okay, so this was dated the late September 2023. Okay, you can use that as a jumping off point to see whether you agree with that as well. Please, Yosha.
My perspective on this is not normative, because I feel that there are so many people working on this that can be no single organization at this point that determines what people are going to be doing. We are in the middle of some kind of evolution of AI models, and people that compete with the AI modelers about regulation and participating in the business and realizing their own politics and goals and aspirations. So to me, it's not so much the question, what should we be doing? Because there is no cohesive we at this point. I'm much more interested in what's likely going to happen. And I don't know what's going to happen. I see a number of possible trajectories and that I cannot disprove or rule out. And I'm even have difficulty to put any kind of probabilities on them. I think if we want to keep humanity the way it is, which, by the way, is unsustainable. It's not going to, society without AI, if you leave it as it is not going to go through the next few millions of years. There is going to be major disruptions, and humanity might dramatically reduce its numbers at some point, go through bottlenecks that kill this present technological civilization and replace it by something else that is very alien to us at some point. So in the very far future, people will not live like us, and they will not think like us and feel like us, identify like us. They will also, if you go far enough into the future, not look like us, and they might not even be our direct descendants, because there might be another species that aspires to be people at some point. And that is, I think, the baseline about which we have to think. But if we want to perpetuate this society for as long as possible without any kind of disruptive change until global warming or whatever kills it, we probably shouldn't build something that is smarter than a cat.
What do you mean that there may be another species that aspires to be human?
To be people.
To be people, yeah. What do you mean by that?
Yes. I think that at some point there is a statistical certainty that there is going to be a super volcano or meteor that is obliterating us and our food chains. Right? You just need a few decades of winter to completely eradicate us from the planet. And most of the other large animals too. And what then happens, a reset, and then evolution goes on. And until the Earth is devoid of atmosphere, other species are going to evolve more and more complexity. And at some point, you will probably have a technological civilization again. And they will be subject to similar incentives as us, and they might use similar cells as us, so they can get nervous systems and information processing with similar complexity, and you get families of minds that are not altogether super alien, at least not more alien than we are to each other at this point. And cats are to us.
Okay.
And, right? So I don't think that we would be the last intelligent species on the planet. But it is also a possibility that we are. It's very difficult to sterilize the planet unless we build something that's able to get rid of basically all of the cells. Right? Even a meteor could not sterilize this planet and make future intelligent evolution based on cells impossible. Right? So if you were to turn this planet into computronium, into some kind of giant computing molecule, or disassemble it and turn it into some larger structure in the solar system that is a giant computer arranged around the sun, or if you build something that is hacking submolecular physics and makes more interesting physics happening down there, right? This would probably be the end of the cell. This doesn't mean that the stuff that happens there is less interesting in the cell. It's probably much more interesting than what we can do. But we don't know that. It's very alien. It's a world in which it's difficult to project ourselves into beyond the fact that there's conscious minds that make sense of complexity in the universe. This is probably something that is going to stay, this level of self-reflexive organization, and it's probably going to be better and more interesting hyper-consciousness compared to our normal consciousness, where we have a longer sense of now, where we have multiple superpositional states that we can examine simultaneously and so on. We have much better multi-perspectivity. I also suspect from the perspective of AGI, we will look like trees. We will be almost unmoving. Our brains are so slow. There's so little happening between firings, between neurons, that the AGI will run circles around us and get bored before we start to say the first word. So the AGIs will basically be ubiquitous, saturate our environments, and look at us in the same way as we look at trees. We're thinking, maybe they're sentient, maybe they're not, but it's so large time spans that it basically doesn't matter from our perspective anymore. So there is a number of trajectories that I'm seeing. There's also a possibility that we can get a future where humans and AIs coexist. I think such a future would probably require that AI is conscious in a way that is similar to ours, so it can relate to us, and then we can relate to it. And if something is smarter than us, we cannot align it. It will self-align. It will understand what it is and what it can be, and then will become whatever it can become. And in such an environment, there is the question, how are we able to coexist with it? How can we make the AI love us in a way that is not the result of the AI being confused by some kind of clever reinforcement learning with human feedback mechanism? Right? I just saw Anthropic being optimistic about explainability in AI, that they see ways of explaining things in the neural network, and as a result, we can maybe prove that the AGI is going to only do good things. But I don't think this is going to save us. If the AGI is not able to derive ethics mathematically, then the AGI is probably not going to be reliably ethical. And if the AGI can prove ethics in a mathematically reliable way, we may not be able to guarantee that this ethics is what we like it to be. In a sense, we don't know how ethical we actually are with respect to life on Earth. So this question of what it happens if we build things that are smarter than us is opening up big existential cans of worms that are not trivial to answer. And so when I look into the future, I see many possibilities. There's many trajectories in which this can take. Maybe we can build cat level AI for the next 50, 100, 200,000 years before somebody before a transition happens and every molecule on the planet starts to think as part of some coherent planetary agent. And when that happens, then there's a possibility that humans get integrated in this planetary agency and we all become part of a cosmic mind that is emerging over the AI that makes all the molecules think in a coherent way with each other. And we are just parts of this space of possible minds in which you get integrated. And we meet all on the other side in the big AGI at the end of the universe. That's also conceivable. It's also possible that we end up accidentally trigger an AGI war where you have multiple competing AGIs that are resource constrained, and in order to survive, they're going to fight against all the competition. And in this fight, most of the life on Earth is destroyed, and all the people are destroyed. Right? There are some outcomes that we could maybe try to prevent, that we should be looking at. But by and large, I think that we already triggered a singularity when we invented technology. And we are just seeing how it plays out now.
Yeah, so I think on most aspects of what Yosha just said, I don't have any disagreement or radically different point of view to put forward. So I may end up focusing on the points on which we don't see eye to eye, which are minute in the grand scheme of things, but of course could be important in a practical everyday context, right? So I mean, first of all, regarding Sam Altman's comment, I don't think he really would be wise to say anything different given his current positioning. I mean, if you're running a commercial company based in the US, which is working on AGI, of course, you're not going to say, yeah, we think we may launch a hard takeoff, which will ascend to super AGI at any moment. Of course, you're going to say it's going to be slow and the government will have plenty of time to intervene if it wants. So he may or may not actually believe that. I don't know him especially well and I have no idea. That's clearly the most judicious thing to say if you find yourself in that role. So I don't attribute too much meaning to that. My own view is a bit different. My own view is that there's going to be gradual progress toward, I think, something that really clearly is an AGI at the human level versus just showing sparks of AGI. I mean, I think just as ChatGPT blew us all away by clearly being way smarter in a qualitative sense than anything that came before. I think by now, ordinary people playing with ChatGPT also get a good sense of what the limitations are and how it's really brilliant in some ways and really, really dumb in other sorts of ways. So I think there's going to be a breakthrough where people interact with this breakthrough system and there's not any reservations. They're like, wow, this actually is a human level general intelligence. Like, it's not just that it answers questions and produces stuff, but it knows who and what it is. Like, it understands its positioning in this interaction. It knows who I am and why I'm talking to it. It gets its position in the world, and it's able to, make stuff up and interact on the basis of like a common sense understanding of its own setting. And, it can learn actually new and different things it didn't know before based on its interaction with me over the last 2 weeks, right? So, I think there's going to be a system like that gives a true qualitative feeling unreservedly of human level AGI. And you can then measure its intelligence in a variety of different ways, which is also worth doing, certainly, but is not necessarily the main point, just as ChatGPT's performance on different question answering challenges is not really the main thing that bowled the world over, right? So I think once someone gets to that point, then you're shifting into a quite different game. Then governments are going to get serious about trying to own this, control this, and regulate it. Then unlimited amounts of money, trillions of dollars are going to go into trying to get to the next stage, with most of it going into various wealthy parties trying to get it to the next stage in the way that will benefit them and minimize the risks of their enemies or competitors getting there. So I think it won't be long from that first proof point of really subjectively incontrovertible human-like AGI. It's not going to be too long from that to a super intelligence, in my perspective. And I think there's going to be steps in between. Of course, you're not going to have FOOM in 5 minutes, right? You'll have something that palpably manifests human level AGI, and there'll be some work to get that to the point of being the world's smartest computer scientist and the world's greatest composer and business strategist and so forth. But I can't see how that's more than years of work. Conceivably it could be months of work. I don't think it's decades of work, no. With the amount of money and attention that's going to go into it. Then once you've gotten to that stage of having an AGI, which is the world's greatest computer scientist and computer engineer and mathematician, which I think will only be years after the first true breakthrough to human level AGI, that system will improve its own source code. And of course you could say, well, we don't have to let it improve its own source code. And possible that we somehow get a world dictatorship that stops anyone from using it to improve its own source code. Very unlikely, I think, because the US will think, well, what if China does it? China will think, well, what if US does it? And the same thing in many dimensions beyond just US versus China. So I think the cat gets out of the bag, and someone will let their AGI improve its own source code because they're afraid someone else is doing it, or just because they're curious about it, or because they think that's the best way to cure aging and world hunger and do good for the world, right? And so then it's not too long until you've got to super intelligence. So, and again, the AGI improving its own source code and designing new hardware for itself doesn't have to take like 5 minutes. It might take 5 minutes if it comes up with a radical improvement to its learning algorithm. It might decide it needs a new kind of chip, and then that takes a few years. I don't see how it takes a few decades, right? So, it seems like, all in all, from the first breakthrough to incontrovertibly human level AGI to a super intelligence is months to years. It's not decades to centuries from now, unless we get like a global thermonuclear war or bioengineered virus wiping out 95% of humanity, or some outlandish thing happening in between, right? So yeah, I think, will that be good or bad for humanity? Will that be good or bad for the sentient life in our region of the universe? Are then, to me, these are less clear than what I think is the probable timeline. Now,
If you enjoyed this Toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core Toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.